It's just a number, to be honest with you.
Okay, for everyone listening in the public, I will mute your lines and we will proceed with the start of the meeting.
All participants are muted and they can unmute themselves.
Ready, Mayor? Ready. Mayor, I'd like to call to order the work session meeting of the Elmwood Park Mayor and Council for June 11, 2020 to order at 7:01 p.m. On roll call, council members Fasolo.
here.
Golubek. Here. Ingui, absent. Pellegrin. Here. Wetchler. Here. Council President Balistrary.
Here.
Mayor Coletti.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to get through this evening, so no further ado. Whereas Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of the State of New Jersey require at the commencement of every meeting a statement of compliance be read by the presiding officer. Now, therefore be advised that meeting requirements for this meeting have been met by publishing an annual notice in the Record and Herald News of Woodland Park, and by posting such notice in the office of the Borough Clerk as well as in a public place within the municipal building. Excuse me. And by notifying interested citizens. Notice was posted on January 8th, 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is being videotaped and will be available on the Borough's website at www.elmwoodparknj.us. Erin?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Please note that due to precautionary measures to help prevent the spread of COVID-19, this meeting is closed to the public and being held via teleconference. The public's lines will be muted except for the portions of public hearing held this evening.
May I have a motion to open this meeting to the public? All in favor? Aye. Mrs. Delaney?
I will now unmute your lines. If you would like to speak, please state your name and address for the record.
All participants are muted.
And please try to eliminate any background noise.
Participants are unmuted.
Would anyone from the public like to speak?
Yeah, Joe Dombrowski, 274 Lincoln Avenue. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Joe.
Mayor, I know recently the Elmwood Park paved the streets, especially here on Lincoln Avenue. There is on Lincoln Avenue, the new pavement, there happens to be a depression in the pavement in front of 232 and 234 Lincoln Avenue. The pavement is at least an inch lower than the rest of the pavement, as well as discolored. It's a totally different color. I was just wondering if anybody has noticed that, and if there's any contingency in the paving plan that if it needs to be repaired, that it gets repaired by the contractor, not by the borough.
Well, for sure, we're still holding money on him. Did you say 232, 234?
Yep.
And that's what?
232, 234.
Washington?
There's an absolute depression in the pavement.
Okay. So just as what we'll do, Joe, if it's good for the chief, we're going to meet tomorrow. Maybe we'll get together a couple of minutes before our scheduled meeting, and go down and take a look-see. Does that work for you, Mr. Foligno?
Yes, Mayor. I'm actually emailing the engineer now so he can follow up with the contractor as well.
Okay.
You'll notice there's a total difference in the color. When they were paving the street, they had paved a portion of it, and then they left some unpaved. And I think when they went back, it's part of the part that they paved at first. But there's definitely not the same. It's not level.
Okay.
You'll see it tomorrow if you come out.
Yeah, definitely. We'll make a note of that to get out there and analyze that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not for me. Thank you.
Good night, Joe. Well, at least goodbye for now, because I don't know if you want to speak later on, but in any case, anybody else care to speak from the public? Going once? Anybody else? Going twice? Please close the public portion. Mrs. Delaney?
Thank you, Mayor. The first item on the agenda this evening is correspondence. So for 1A, It's more of just an FYI. A couple months back, I started the Trex Recycling Challenge where we would collect the plastic bags and film. We had a couple months to collect 500 pounds to receive a free bench made out of said plastic. We did meet that benchmark, pun intended, and we ordered our bench, which should be here in approximately 60 days or so. They're a little delayed because of the pandemic, but I spoke with Scott Cars, who recommended a black bench to be placed in the back here of the municipal building by the generator, where they're kind of beautifying the building there, and it will match the other benches and other aesthetics of the community.
Is the council all right with that? It's a dead spot. We can clean it up a little. I think it's an excellent idea. All right.
Okay, 1B is just a memo from our MEL. It's the third health emergency memo, primarily focused on the COVID-19 pandemic. Just sharing that with the mayor and council. And then 1C is an ordinance that the township of Saddlebrook is adopting in regards to vape shops in their town. It's a requirement that they send this to surrounding municipalities, just as we would have to if we were adopting a similar ordinance. So again, this is just an FYI from Saddlebrook. Any questions? Okay, moving on to item number 2, which is resolutions. 2A, I have a sample resolution from the Township of Montville that I wanted to present to the mayor and council in regards to appointing deputy custodians, deputy records custodians. So I am the primary and sole records custodian of the borough right now in regards to OPRA, which is the Open Public Records Act. The police department does receive OPRA requests, and as it stands right now, if they were to receive a request and one of their records clerks responds to that request, and I don't review it or see it, or they don't respond to the request in time, I could have no knowledge and be held responsible for it. There could be a complaint filed with the GRC. I could be fined. I could also get a ding on my license. So basically what this would do is it would appoint the 2 police records custodians as deputy custodians for police received OPRA requests. And again, I just got a sample from another town that had something similar.
Any questions on that, council? Continue.
Okay, 2B is a resolution that we adopt on a yearly basis. The one in front of you was from 2019, and because of the hack, it was done a little bit later, so I brought it to our CFO's attention that we should do so earlier this year. So they are working on the names for the state contracts that we use. This allows us in some instances to not go out to bid, not have to receive 3 quotes, because that whole process has already been done under these state contract vendors. So it's just, again, something that we do on a yearly basis.
Erin, correct me if I'm wrong. We use this when we are in consideration for new police vehicles.
Yes,
Fire
exactly.
trucks.
Police vehicles, fire trucks, equipment for our parks, like the rubber flooring, the actual equipment itself, the playground equipment. So a lot of times it's easier, rather than having to go out for 3 quotes, or if it exceeds the bid threshold, to use a state contract vendor, because the state did all of the work for us.
Right, okay. They should continue to do that on other items.
Okay, 2C are 2 volunteer firefighter applications. One, I believe, is a junior member, and then one is a regular member. All good with that? Okay, in front of your seats this evening, I put a little add-on. I also had mentioned it via email. So under 2D is related to the Community Development Block Grant. It was correspondence that I received from the director of the Division of Community Development, Robert Esposito. And basically, every 3 years, we enter into a 3-year cooperative agreement renewal for our CDBG grants. So in order for us to be eligible for the county grants, we have to enter this agreement. So there will be a resolution allowing us to sign the a cooperative agreement, and then to enter into the community development program. Now, the reason why I didn't hold on to it until July and added it on until tonight is because they are under a tight deadline with the state, and they need to have all resolutions by July 18th, which was very close to our July meeting. So Mr. Esposito really appreciated us adding it to June, and they're actually sending someone the following Monday to hand pick up the resolutions. That's how important this is for us to participate.
Does anybody else care to elaborate on that? Mr. Foligno, would you care to? No? Daniel, anything on that? Okay, because I know,
We have to do it if we want money. But are we passing a next week we'll pass a resolution?
Yeah, so on, speaking of community development block grant, for the public's notice, if you have not seen our Facebook page or the public notice in the newspaper, we are hosting a special public meeting on Monday, June 22nd at 2 p.m. You would participate in the same method that you are participating in tonight's meeting, and that's simply to adopt a resolution to enter in and submit a grant for Bergen County open space. That's in regards to the marina project. Okay. Moving on to 3A is our fire prevention non-life hazard use ordinance. I do believe we have on the line our fire official, Steve Kochik. So Steve, at this time, if you can unmute yourself and present the ordinance to the mayor and council.
So what this actually does is we have, you guys can all hear me, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
hi, Steve.
Okay, good. So what this ordinance does is we had a business move into town on Market Street. It's a cooperative sober living house. What they do is they have people that are recovering alcoholics and that stuff. They're living there. And what happens is we don't have any jurisdiction over that. So they could move in up to 6 people. We've got no say on pretty much anything that happens there. What this does, by adding this to the ordinance, this actually gives fire prevention jurisdiction to have them register with us and do an annual inspection for the safety of the people that they move in there, and also the safety of the owner of the property. With this, I've actually been in constant contact myself and Tony with the property owner right now, and he has voluntarily registered with us. We just want to put this in place so you know, everything's on the up and ups with this. I know I've had a couple conversations with the chief about this. I believe he sent this over to Sal as well to take a look and give his input on this as well.
okay, is there anything other than that we should know about this situation?
No, and what we did is we kind of left this pretty generic, and the reason we did leave this generic is, God forbid, something in the future pops up something similar to this, it does give us jurisdiction as well. And this is more strictly for the safety aspect of the people living there and the owner of the property as well.
Are they barrier-free?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I could hear you.
Are the buildings, is it required that they're barrier-free?
What they actually did is they're actually licensed by the DCA, but what had happened is their license is a Class F license. Under the fire prevention code, what it does is all licenses A, B, C, D, and E, we have jurisdiction on. As an F license, we don't have jurisdiction. That's why we needed to put this in there to just get jurisdiction on this.
Okay,
Mayor, I have a question, if I may.
absolutely.
What would this be considered, like in a 1 or 2 word? Is this a halfway house? Is it a rehab center? Like what is this?
This actually falls under a 1 or 2 family residential house.
Okay, but I mean, did they get a CO? Like what's the and the only reason I ask, and go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, the only reason I bring this up is because, and I came across this a few weeks ago just looking through the borough code. The borough code, and it is what it is. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it or against it. says that rehab centers, drug clinics, and are like not allowed in Elmwood Park. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if that's something that's worth considering, but
So that's why you were seeking the definition.
yeah, I'm curious because it sparked. I was looking through the code a few weeks ago, and it says it's 4-1.2 prohibited businesses within all districts throughout the borough of Elmwood Park. The following activities, businesses, and enterprises are hereby prohibited: 1, rehab centers; 2, drug clinics, and then there's halfway houses is one of them. So, which I don't even know if that's allowed, but I'm just throwing that out for maybe the attorney to consider.
Steve, if I'm not mistaken, isn't this classified under something different?
Correct.
Okay.
There was actually legislation on this, and Councilman Dan,
Okay.
I can actually forward you that as well if you want me to. But there's actually the legislation is fairly new within the past year, and both myself and Tony have been on the phone with the DCA, and basically what the state did is circumvented everything
Gotcha.
to take the building department and fire prevention out of the loop on everything. That's why putting this into the ordinance puts us back into the loop. So we do have jurisdiction over this then.
If I may, Mayor,
Yes, please.
with this particular ordinance, the classification is so obscure. It's not in our code. It doesn't meet any of the specifications because the state did their own little step, a two-step type of, dance around the whole thing so that they get jurisdiction, and then the only ones that would be allowed to deal with them is actually the state that sets forth requirements to deal with these particular scenario. This is a good idea because our code didn't address it, but now it gives them the opportunity to address it.
It's actually putting teeth.
A little control.
Yeah. Yeah. I recall years ago when these situations were coming into town, we tried to get clarification, and anything we wanted to do locally, deny or accept, was superseded by the state. And we had no choice. But at least now, they'll have to fall under our building codes, which is a good thing. Because it was ambiguous before that.
Unfortunate part.
Go ahead, Steve.
That's the unfortunate part with the way they actually made, under the DCA, they made this license. They made it as a new classification, it's a Class F, and where we have no jurisdiction under a Class F. And it says the sole person having jurisdiction is the DCA. So it's kind of like we've got no say in this, and my personal opinion and feeling is that we should, at least for us as a borough, to make sure everything's safe, and they're going in once a year.
Yeah. I guess there had to be a couple of incidences where there was fires, et cetera, or somebody falling or whatever, and then the finger was trying to be pointed, and it couldn't be pointed at anybody. But now at least...
Correct, and I had actually reached out to the Division of Fire Safety on this as well, to my local rep, and I was like, hey, and he goes, you're not the only fire official that we've had this problem with. He goes, there's many towns that are in the exact same boat, and he said, the only way to get control of this and get jurisdiction is by putting it into your fire prevention ordinance.
Excellent.
And that was what we're doing.
Good job, Steve.
You got it, not a problem.
Anybody have a question for Steve before we let him go? Thank you, Steve.
You got it, thank you, Mayor, have a good one.
Okay, moving on to 3B. This is more of just a sample of what was received in the past in regards to our drug-free school zone map. So the last time they were updated was in 2017, and I spoke with officers Scott and Garillo, and they made me aware that because of the addition of new schools and other facilities in town, they need to work with the engineer to redo our drug-free school zone maps. And when they do so, an ordinance needs to be adopted. I know that they are working with the engineer. They may or not be ready for next week, but just in case they are, I wanted to put this on the agenda for everyone. If they're not ready, then they will be on for July, and I don't know if the chief wants to add on to that.
Just that there's some schools that may not be incorporated in the 2017 maps that were done. We have the Kinder Castle. I'm not sure if Goddard was there or not then, and it matters for charging purposes with narcotics offenses.
Anyone else care to discuss this? Aaron?
Okay, moving on to 3C, it's our 2020 salary ordinance for our department heads and other employees that do not fit into any of the contracts. It's something that we do on a yearly basis. It's normally introduced in November, and I also included 2019 as a comparison for everyone. This is also going to be on the agenda for our executive session, but just for the public's sake, I also wanted to put it on our regular agenda under ordinances.
Anyone have any questions on this at this point? If not, we can move on, Aaron?
Okay, 3D is a follow-up to the discussion that was held last week in regards to our mobile food truck ordinance. I know our ordinance committee met with our attorney prior to this evening, so with that being said, I'll turn the mic over to whoever wants to.
Who chaired that committee? Okay,
Mayor, I can talk about it if you like.
absolutely.
So we had a discussion regarding the food truck situation in town, and due to COVID, it seems to be a situation where we want to encourage that now. So Mr. Ingraffia came up with a good idea to come up with a resolution that kind of relaxes some of the provisions in the ordinance to allow the trucks to operate during, all hours rather than restricted like it is in the ordinance. From now until November, which is the expiration of the temporary order that's in place. Mr. Ingraffia, you have anything to add?
Yeah, Mayor, in view of the meeting that we had and reviewing the ordinance, it was my recommendation that rather than making any amendments to the ordinance itself, which takes approximately 2 months, first you have to prepare it, then you have to have the first reading, then you have to have it published, then you have to have a second reading. Because of the circumstances and what is being attempted to be accomplished, I recommend that we do it by resolution. And I can prepare the resolution so that it can be passed at the next meeting, if it's okay with the council and yourself, Mayor, where it would authorize the police chief, any official in town, to relax the restrictions as to the time and the period of time and place where they have to sit as a truck, because right here we have a 30-minute time period, and then they have to move. This would also give an opportunity to local restaurants that do not have any outside availability of providing food for outside, outdoor type of servicing, that a truck could be placed before their establishment, and also waive the fact of the 1,000-foot distance from an establishment if that establishment is the owner of the truck or the truck is the owner of the establishment. So I'm going to word it so that it relaxes that for a period of time up until maybe potentially November. We can see how things work out. If then there's a need to amend the ordinance, then we can work on, in the interim, to change it. But at least right now, we give a breathing chance to the restaurant owners or food processing people to be able to sell their food and be active and do business.
I have 2 questions, Sal.
Sure.
I spoke with the chief about this afternoon. As far as the lineup, chain of command in terms of who comes first, et cetera, I would think that should go to an EP vendor first.
Oh, yeah, it's given. That is not being relaxed.
That's given, that's
It's
in there?
in the ordinance.
Okay. Now, here's my other question. We have Donna, who would have done the street fair, and when she hires out or agrees to a contract, that vendor is bringing in all their own trucks,
Correct.
Special events would be separate.
Yeah, but
special,
here in the ordinance, it specifically sets forth that any special event or nonprofit event is not subject to this.
okay,
So you can work as you normally would have done it. So
Yeah.
it's not
yeah.
subject.
Because it would be difficult for her to call the vendor up
Of course.
and then say to them, I want everything but your trucks.
Yeah.
And then,
No, actually, there was an issue, not an issue, a concern of how this particular ordinance was in any way conflicting with the Board of Health ordinance. Now, mind you, that the Board of Health ordinances are separate and distinct. You're comparing apples and oranges. The Board of Health controls the health aspect and they license based on the health aspect. There is no limit to trucks, there is no limit to anything. And it's my understanding that in the borough, there is approximately right now one ice cream truck, I believe. Yes. And from what was provided by Aaron, one ice cream truck and, where is that?
One standing
One stand-
mobile truck, which is on a private property, and then multiple catering
Yeah.
trucks. But my main question was the fee. I understand they're two separate
Yeah.
and distinct ordinances, but this ordinance calls for $300 and the Board of Health would be $350. So if that's the case, then they would have to pay both fees, $650.
Yeah.
and I don't
But-
think that's outrageous, $650 for the
Well,
year.
Let me
Right.
say this, that if you look at other ordinances, the $300, actually, the ordinance, the Board of Health ordinance is $325. If you look at other ordinances, they can range from 1,600 to 2,700, I mean, a year. And this is pretty reasonable, but it's the privilege of utilizing public roadway and public right-of-way. It has nothing to do with the Board of Health. Board of Health has its own responsibility, and that money is split with the state anyway, because they have to give it to the state. So that's just for the purposes of them authorizing licensing any truck, not just these trucks. So it's two totally different.
So Sal, what do you say, when we retire, you and I get a hot dog truck and,
Well, I tell you, Mayor, not for anything, but I was in law school, there was a vendor who had a Sabrett truck. And that's
Sabrett
from the
hot
law
dogs.
school.
Yeah,
Sabrett
good.
hot dog.
yeah.
And I used to always, and I love Sabrett hot dogs. Maybe I should get paid for doing the advertising.
Well,
And I used to go there and I say, gee, you know, and this guy would be there 1 month, and then the next month he'd be gone. Then he'd come back again the next month. And I said, Vinny, I said, last time I was there, I said, I was looking for a hot dog last month and you weren't around. He says, yeah, well, he says, I'm here 1 month, I make the money, I go to Florida and spend it. Okay, God bless you, I said, that's good. So I said, that's something I want to do.
Mayor, can I just add something?
sure, absolutely.
So when we were in the meeting also, Mr. Ingraffia also said that in case something does come up that something isn't working, that we can revisit with another resolution. We're not tied into November 30th. If we see that it's just not working out in some way, we can revisit a resolution again. And then-
Quickly.
Yeah, quickly.
You
As
can-
opposed to going through the
Right.
ordinance.
Right. So that is another option. You just want everybody to know that it's not in stone till November 30th. If it's not working properly, we can revisit it again.
But my recommendation was to give it a time so that at that point, we would know how long it would work. But in the interim, if things change, then you can revoke that resolution by another resolution, rather than messing and putting the ordinance back the way it actually was. Would enforce.
Any further discussion on that? No, we're good? We're good?
And also, by doing it this way, it relieves anyone from the enforcing aspect, that it is the wish of the mayor and the council to waive the enforcement of that particular aspect of the ordinance at this time for a specific time period. So,
So I'd just like to thank you because you made that a very easy transition. We had a lot of questions for Mr. Ingraffia, and he really made it easy and simple. We got done a lot quicker than we thought because of his research and, bringing ideas.
Well,
to
that's
us.
why I want,
That's why we hired him, right?
no, that's why I want him as my partner in the hot dog wagon. He's got all the answers.
absolutely. Not quite. Some of the answers.
Peppers and onions, we're going to have Sal,
Yeah,
Chili,
chili.
yeah.
Hot dog, can't beat that hot dog, let me tell you.
Okay, so Sal, you'll prepare the resolution.
Yes, I'll prepare
Okay.
if the council so wishes, the
And
mayor.
I'll inform Marlene that both
I will
fees
prepare-
stand, and.
Just
I'll
just
also-
one question. What's the first fee for, the $300 on our
That is
ordinance?
for, so on the ordinance, that's for their application for a mobile food truck for the borough. So they would need to apply to have a food truck license to the clerk's office. I created an application. And then they would also need to go through the process of the health department, getting inspected, and then also through fire prevention too.
That's like, Erin, registration for you, so you know exactly who's gonna be in this town.
Exactly.
This way you have
Mhm.
your identification.
Yep, and as the ordinance says, it's limited to 4, so also keeping track of that as well.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Sal. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is 4, which is discussions. So also in regards to the Health Department, our Board of Health Secretary, Marlene DeStefano, had asked just that I get your opinion. So all of her business renewals go into, well, business registrations go until the end of June. June 30th, so right now is the time where she'd start kind of sending out letters and charging everyone for their renewals for July 1st. So she just wanted to make sure that everyone was comfortable with that date. There is no guidance from the state in extending that, but again, just wanted to make sure that you guys were okay with that in case any businesses reached out. So that's like your nail salons, hair salons, food vendors, etc. So we'll proceed as normal. Okay. And then also for B is a discussion for Market Street Dining, an idea I'll turn over to the chief.
Yes, so the first thing for this is we're getting a lot of inquiries in the building department for restaurants to extend their dining outdoors, which the governor is permitting, but he's leaving it up to the towns to figure out. So the normal process is that they would have to go before the zoning board. We don't want to make the process so difficult because we're trying to be conscious of helping these businesses get back up and running again and also provide good services for our community. So what we'd like to do through resolution, and Mr. Ingraffia can elaborate also, is allow the building department to review these circumstances one at a time, maybe have the business bring in a drawing and show what they're looking to do. They can go out there and inspect it, and they can approve it from their level rather than having to go to the board. Sal?
Again, Mayor, this is a situation where, again, it's a use and occupancy of a public right-of-way, which is the sidewalks, and, or other places which they may want to ask for permission. A parking lot or a park of some sort, or whatever, how close they are to it. Again, without amending any zoning ordinances, again, the council can request, by way of resolution, can actually outline a relaxation of that aspect and the use of. But I also, as the chief provided me, also is good thinking, is that we would need to have a release from the owners of the restaurants who are using the facility or the area, so that we are relieved from any responsibility or liabilities, and that they would take on the responsibility and absorb the responsibility of liability for any injuries or that would occur.
We're
So
good
that
with
would
that?
be one of the things that they would have to sign.
We're good with that. Now, did we run this by Jiff just for the,
I asked that same question.
JIF shouldn't be a problem, because once we have the agreement, now, what I can do is get them to approve the agreement. And I wouldn't think that they would have any problems with it, because they would still not be responsible, and the borough will be, would not be liable for any injuries that may result in.
it's a great idea, but let's double check
Yeah,
that and
sure.
make sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that we might want to get in this resolution, that these store owners will be responsible for cleaning up,
Oh, yeah.
and especially when the wind comes and you have two stores on the same block and they're blowing the trash down this way. We don't want that one owner saying to us, it's his trash. Clean it. You see it? Clean it.
It would leave, the resolution would give the authority to, again, the chief, the borough, and any borough department who would be responsible for citing anyone for violations.
Well, if you tell them that Mike's in charge of making sure that it's clean, they better watch out.
It'll be clean, I'm sure.
Mayor, just a quick
Yes.
question. Chief, do you envision this to be streets also? Not like isolated events. I'm saying in general, as part of a business, saying, well, we'd like this not to be a parking spot and we have a way to, I don't know, put things up. Are we entertaining that, or is that case by case?
To use the public street?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can do it case by case. If it's a non-busy area or something, then we should leave that up to the discretion of combination of the building construction official and myself.
Sounds good.
Here's another scenario that might pop up. Take in the Virgo Mall, Giovanni's, it's a new name there now, El Dente. Now, if they were smart, they would go to the owner of the property and say, give me a couple parking spaces outside there. We want to make sure we got that covered too. Because where would they go? And these businesses, I tell you, these restaurants, they're getting it. I don't know where they're going. This is a great idea to help them out. Restricted 25%, 50%. Well,
And the other thing we thought about with this is, we don't want to have an expiration date for this, right? Because they're going to have to invest money in this, right, for outdoor seating stuff. So do we want to make them do this for 3 months and then take it away from them? No. So can we?
No, actually, what you can do is carry it for a period of 6 months, and if it works, then what you can do is request that they go for a variance application, for variance before the zoning.
well, that would be defeating the point. As the chief said, we want to make this as mitigated as possible, so that, and then here's the other part of that, Sal. I'm a businessman. I like the idea of this outside dining. It's going to cost me $20,000 to set it up the way I want. Now, if I know that there's a sunset in 6 months, I'm going to hesitate and maybe not do it. I think we could always rescind, correct, the approval aspect of it.
Well, you have to be very careful because, I'm sorry, Matt, you have to be very careful because once you grant, now you're not granting on a temporary basis, you're granting on a permanent basis, and that should be done then by ordinance. You would have to amend your zoning.
Okay, so what can we do to soften it so that it doesn't derail the businessman from making that initial investment?
Well, you have to look at it, Mayor, not for anything, as also understanding business. Depending on what they're going to do and what the space is, you can't make it so that it becomes permanent where they have excess, continuous use. And all of a sudden, it'll become a license. And once that's done, you can't revoke it. Okay? So it's a basis where you want to help to a certain point, but then you don't want someone to start doing it where, if you're looking at a sidewalk area or even a parking lot area, you don't want that to become the permanent aspect, because once the business is then able to run at 100%, you really don't want that to continue. You want it to stop. So you're giving an incentive to do it, but they also have to understand that they're doing it for their own good, to make profit, and they're doing it not knowing that they're going to eventually not be able to utilize it again. So the expense of putting that kind of money out there, you would have to be crazy to put any really expensive
Setup.
Can I make a
aspect.
suggestion? What if we word it as, while indoor dining is still restricted, this will be permissible, provided it's approved by the department and the administrator.
And you stayed within the guidelines
Yeah,
of whatever guidelines we set up.
And then
As
like
long-
Sal said, if they want to, if it makes sense and it works and it's not infringing upon excessive, use of parking spaces or the public right of way, then at that point, they can go to the board
Yes.
for a variance.
Yes, absolutely,
Make sense?
absolutely.
So what would be the sunset on the initial,
Until the
While
state,
while
the executive,
While the pandemic is still,
while the
while
government,
there's still a reduced seating.
yeah, while the governor of the state of New Jersey, limits the accessibility to 100%,
that's a key word,
that's it.
yeah.
As long as that executive order stands, that they're still not able to run at 100% capacity, then this stays available.
Yeah.
And to be honest, in 6 months, it's gonna be December, and it's gonna be cold, and nobody's gonna sit
Yeah,
outside.
it's going to be out anyway.
So you figure November, December, it's gonna start getting really cold, and sometimes even in October, nobody's gonna wanna sit outside, dying. So this way, if we put it till next year, and see what's going on, this way everybody, what they put out, on the front, they could bring back in and store it, and then bring it back out again, reuse it again, so they're
Yeah,
not
so what
using-
you're saying is, with this short amount of time left, it's probably going to be more practical for them to maybe catch the tail end of this season with that investment, knowing that they're going to be able to do it in
Use it
April
again, yep.
or May.
Yeah, as soon as the weather
Makes
breaks,
sense.
this way, they have the opportunity, they're not losing any money, they're gonna see that they still can use it next year.
Right, and that's our concern. We want to make sure that if they invest that 10,000,
We
15,000,
want to use it again, we don't want to say, well, that's it, you're done.
right, okay.
If I
Again,
can,
Mayor,
Mayor.
it has to be very consistent with what is going on right now, because that is what's giving you, I'm not saying it's 100% authority, but one can argue that it's giving you that sort of authority to allow people to run back there into their business again and start working, and which meets sort of what everyone agrees to.
So what happens
The
with,
problem is you don't want to make it so permanent. Now, to make it permanent, then you have to amend the ordinance, because then the ordinance can be permissible. You can make it a permissible or conditional use, and the zoning board wouldn't even have to be involved. But, again, you have to go through and change the ordinance. And again, by changing the ordinance, you're looking at 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, no.
By that time, you're not going to be outside.
Mayor, if I may, maybe when we do put this through as a temporary thing, we could look at changing the ordinance, because I've always been a fan of, outdoor dining, especially on Market Street. Maybe send them a letter telling them what steps they have to take to make it permanent, and then in this temporary time, we could kind of discuss changing the ordinance to make it easier for a business that has already done this to maybe lack some of the rules to allow them to keep it.
well, I think our attitude and our building department's attitude would be conducive to what you just said. So I think that's going to be an automatic, because let's face it, we are a business-friendly town. We are.
To kind of promote it to, this is the incentive, if you do it and it works and it's, all approved.
Case by case.
Yeah, case by
Case
case.
by-
If you want to see it permanent, these are the steps you have to take, just to keep them in the loop. Like, it's a good thing to invest in your business, and if you want to see it permanent, this is what you have to do.
All right, so you're giving them, at the end, advice on that we still will be receptive to them.
Investment in our town.
Yeah, okay.
Also, Mayor, during this period of time, you also get an opportunity to see how many,
And how it works.
how it works, whether it's conducive, and whether it's not a problem.
Sal, what do we do with a situation like Warsaw that has that already, right? I believe they have outside seating?
They're already in,
But if they wanted to increase,
They want to increase it.
yeah.
still,
Case by case.
the increase will fall under the auspices of this
Well, if they have-
resolution.
If they have,
Warsaw?
I believe they do.
I think it's covered though, isn't it?
yeah, they're covered.
Like a patio.
Closed.
They're,
Right, but what happens if they want to extend?
extend what?
Case by case. Go out into the park.
Go into the parking lot?
Oh, yeah, well, then, fine. They're,
The same thing as any
They could do it in the parking lot, it's not a problem.
So that new section that fall under the auspices of what this resolution is going
Yeah,
to...
under this, they'd be extending it, but then if they wanted it permanent, they would.
Street or private property,
Yeah.
anything beyond what you were approved for when you got approval to function as a business.
Yeah, it's their own private property.
It could be a
so
roof, I
it's-
mean,
Right.
if you
Yeah,
can make it work.
Yeah.
And I just
But-
have a question too. You had a concern about the cleanliness and everything. Are there going to be like fines if they don't keep up with it? Because,
Well, you already have fines.
I know, but I think it's going to have to be closely monitored because we don't really have that. And it could get bad quick if we're not really keeping an eye on the situation.
That's why they got to be responsible, and they will be fined if they're not. So that it's,
Will we revoke your ability to do it if you don't follow the guidelines?
I'll word it in a way that you are going to give it a lot of leadway to your officials. This way they could deal with it. Okay?
And then also, just to reiterate, I know I mentioned it last week, like if they are going to have alcohol beyond the scope of inside of their building, they need to apply with the state. So whoever's giving the
Yeah.
approval, it's $75 application, but it has nothing to do with us, it's
Yeah,
state.
it's a state.
We've had one business apply already.
Yes.
excellent, excellent.
Blue 42, and then also Mykonos has inquired, but they didn't submit it yet.
For this.
For, the alcohol
Yeah, because
permission.
you
They
can't-
call our office for that, everything else.
42 doesn't have that for the
They,
outside?
they
do,
don't
but
have
they
it
want to
for,
expand
Excellent.
past the scope
Yeah.
of what they're approved for.
it's
Okay.
when you have public street and public right of way that
Gets-
that extends to.
Yeah, gets,
Or even if it's their own private property,
Yeah.
too. If they need to apply to
Yeah.
the state.
okay. Any
Okay,
further?
so I'll wait for the attorney, Mike, on that. Anything else for that discussion? Okay.
We're good.
Good, Mayor? All right. Lastly, for my agenda are departmental reports. I only have 3 this evening. The first one was sent via email, but I also like to include it in your packets. It's the Building Department Tracker. 5B is the EMS calls for May 2020. And then 5C is the Finance Department report. So this is what has been expended from January through May 31st. And then I believe she also included, yes, the water budget as well as the last page. So that is all I have for public session, Mayor. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Erin. Ladies and gentlemen, due to the pandemic, over the last 2 months, we've suspended council reports, just to let you know that once again. However, things do pop up in the course of a meeting, and I do want to allow the council to speak on anything that in the course of this evening they care to expand upon. Daniel, I'm going to ask you to speak, and I'm going to
Even if I have nothing to say?
give you a question.
That's dangerous.
I'm going to give you a question. In reference to the census, I saw that email today. Was that accurate with that, the census lady said that for every 100 people that we don't account for, it's $1.2 million?
Yes.
We don't get?
Ms. Van dem Hagen.
Thank
our-
you.
Our honorable census lady, who has worked very hard in this committee. She had sent out an email to the committee to kind of like have different ways to message to the people. And I mean, I'm assuming it's true that for every 100 people that we undercount, that we're losing $1 million in some combination of federal money. Not all money like related to Elmwood Park government, has Medicare, Medicaid, things like that involved too. But yes, so just to jump on that a little more, we are just shy of 70%. Ms. Van dem Hagen, working with Ms. Fava in the BA's office, ordered lawn signs. I think, was it 100 lawn signs for the community to spread the awareness. So those will be coming in. I think most of the council members provided their address. And they're in.
It'll be going out tomorrow or Monday.
Okay, perfect.
I'll take one.
I'll take one.
And we still have enough money to do another mailer. where these kinds of facts like, hey, for every 100 people we don't count, we lose this much money. And my thought is, and the theme of the first mail was kind of like to shame people into doing it. And the reality is, my thought is thank the 70% that did it and tell the other 30% that because you didn't do it, you will have people from the government knocking on your door until you do it. And I think people knocking on your door is something that will get people to move really quickly. So that's just kind of the thought process. But we're doing well, to answer your question.
All I had to
Mr.
do was
Mayor.
jumpstart him. See that? And he went. I just want to reiterate what he said. 100 people unaccountable represents $1.2 million, and the share of that would be going to Elmwood Park. So that's the importance of this. If we're at 75%, which is phenomenal. I'm sorry?
Almost 70.
Oh, 70. And we need another 25%. And we'll get a better share of that federal money that's out there. Thank you,
It's
Daniel.
going to be another year because of COVID. So there's time.
Anyone else care to speak? Any council? No?
I just want to,
Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
say I'm happy to be physically back. And I want to thank everybody that has reached out to me. And now I can get back to progress.
We're happy to have you back, Council
Thank
President.
you.
Anybody else care to speak? Sandy? Yes, absolutely. Yes, dear.
Thank you, darling. I'd like to say my condolences to Denise Ingram and her family about Sal's mom passing away yesterday. Our hearts and our prayers are all out to her and her family. Progress.
I just have two things, and Sandy, you might want to elaborate on this. On the 19th with the drive-in, would you like to take it? Or? Okay. Just want to remind the public that we're going to have a drive-in movie night, and that will be on the 19th of June. And kudos goes out to Donna Pugliese, our rec director, for putting event together for our community, especially at this time. It's going to be a long night for the mayor and council. So council, make sure you eat your Wheaties in the morning and keep your strength up. And another good feel item I'd like to bring up is just a State of the Union regarding the pandemic. I'm happy once again to say the governing body here in Elmwood Park is running smooth and flawless. Soon we'll be opening the municipal building once glass petitions are installed in all of our departments. And with that said, Mrs. Delaney, I am concluded my little report there.
Just a question, the drive-in theater is on the 19th?
Yes,
Is that the same day as the possible graduation?
yes.
Okay,
Possible now.
possible.
Yeah. Chief, you want to elaborate a little bit how that's changed in the last 24 hours? The school graduations, you and I were up there.
Sure. So we had a meeting with the school. They want to do a caravan-style graduation, which we are going to support them with and accommodate. The police department will be heavily involved in making that happen. Mayor and council are going to be at the ceremony as well. However, a few hours after that meeting, the governor issued some changes and is permitting outdoor gatherings with more people allowed. So I believe the school is reconsidering that. I don't believe they've come up with a conclusion yet, but they are considering the second course of action there with the outdoor graduation.
I just want to say, I want to commend them for listening to the students. I know the students put together a petition to try to get kind of normal graduation, and they got over 400 signatures on that petition. So I just want to commend them and commend the Board of Ed too for listening out.
It's really hard for these kids. I mean, they go through all these years of education, and they look forward to that graduation, and then comes the pandemic. I know my grandson he didn't get to go on his field trip, graduated 8th grade, and it was heartbroken, you know? So we got to feel for them. And however, we are functioning under restrictions that come down, the executive order from the governor of the state, no matter what we feel and what we think we can do. But hopefully now, with him relaxing some of those restrictions, we can maybe get back to normality with that graduation. So, anybody else care to speak? If not, then I will open it up to the public to speak.
Okay, again, at this time, I will unmute the public's lines. If you do want to speak, please state your name and address for the record. And for those not speaking, please try to eliminate any background noise.
Excuse
All
me?
participants are muted.
All in favor, opening to the public? Thank you.
All participants are unmuted.
Would anyone from the public like to speak?
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Joe Dombrowski, 274 Lincoln Avenue.
I thought you went to sleep, Joe. You're still with us.
I'm still with you. No fire call yet. I would like to just discuss the Market Street dining. First of all, I think it's reasonable and responsible for the mayor and the council to discuss this and to take this into consideration and try to make everything happen. There's only a couple of things, and again, because obviously I'm not seeing any of the backup. Is the Board of Health also involved in this? Because, you know, as you change the venue of where you're serving, it could change the demographics of how the product is being stored. I think hopefully the Board of Health is going to be very much involved in this temporary or permanent, whichever way you decide to go. And then lastly, the only other concern that I would have is that, you know, as you said, Mayor, you're a businessman, and if you're going to have to put $20-something thousand into doing something like this, you know, are you going to be willing to do it? My concern is that you're going to have some of these you know, try to go the cheap way and go with these little pop-up tents that you could buy at a Home Depot or something like that. The problem with that is if they are not you know, if they're not held down properly, you know, with the winds that we get some of our summer nights going down Market Street, those are going to become projectiles and potentially endanger not only the people eating there, but maybe others on the street. And then lastly, the only other thing is that, you know, I know from years past we've had some quality of life issues with residents in the area of rural Warsaw about noise and so on and so forth. Are you taking any of that into consideration for outdoor dining? You know, now you're because of the way that particular business is, it's very close to the residents, and we do have a few others in town that have that situation. Is there going to be something, you know, as far as quality of life for the residents? Is there going to be a shut-off time that they can no longer, you know, have outdoor service? That has to be taken into consideration.
I'll address number 3, the noise. Once again, we have a noise ordinance that would be applied to this. What we're trying to do, Joe, is, and I'm sure you're well aware of it, that these restaurants, out of all the businesses, are in bad shape. And with the requirement of 25% or 50%, they're not going to make it with that. So we want to do all we could to help them survive.
I completely agree with. I agree with this wholeheartedly. I'm just saying, if you're going to go this measure, please think of all of these things that could potentially happen. It's one thing if this is a temporary situation where it's only a couple of months. But if I'm a resident that lives next door to this restaurant, and now they have a permanent location outdoors for 365 days a year, or just even the summertime. I don't know. I don't know if I, as a resident, would be very happy to be listening to that all the time. You know, right now it's not affecting them, but maybe a few times when people go outside. But now you're taking the whole indoor restaurant, bringing it outdoors.
Right. It's just something that we're going to have to deal with spontaneously. Once again, it's the least probably we can do as a governing body to help these people out. And as far as the Board of Health, your question on the Board of Health, whatever requirements they have now are going to be passed on to this extension, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot the first
again,
question.
I am 100% behind this. I think it's a great idea. I would be concerned if the structures, if they decide to build anything, that it's obviously, and I'm sure the building department will be very heavily involved in it, that it can maintain or sustain a very windy night.
No, we hear you. The other thing that you said, on the lighter side, if they're out there in December at the Warsaw, I'd be a little concerned with that. But,
Agreed.
you know. All right, anything else, Joe?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, Joe. Anyone else care to speak?
Jeffrey Freitag, 35 Hillman Drive. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're a lot better off than I am sitting here because you can't hear them. I hear very little. And I hear some people very well, others very little. Regarding the food trucks, I have no idea. It's very difficult. Just a couple of questions, though. That was one issue regarding being able to hear. Fire prevention, that was one thing that Mr. Kochik, Inspector Kochik brought up. What do they do for group homes that currently exist as far as inspections and things? Anything, or are they under I think it's Human Services? Who does the inspections there?
That's a good question, Jeff. And I think that was the purpose of what Steve was doing, was to take the ambiguity out of it and make it so that we were more controlled.
Something about ambiguity?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Take that out of it and allow him to have some teeth in his inspections.
I think he was particularly talking about one particular facility, and that was concerning something else, not something controlled, I don't think, by Human Services.
Okay, so what?
I believe those are already licensed. I'm just wondering regarding fire inspections, if the state does them, if that's under that jurisdiction. I don't know. That's why I'm raising the question.
That's a good question.
Anyway,
Maybe we can get you an answer comes Monday.
Okay.
Erin,
now,
can we
also-
see if we can get an answer for that? Okay. We'll get you an answer, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. The other things are, you have some restaurants in the community, I believe, that are BYOB, and are they going to be permitted to operate? What's that?
Somebody was cutting in on you. Wasn't nobody here, Jeff? Go ahead, continue.
I think some,
Continue, Jeff.
okay, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, I believe I know at least of one, there's probably maybe more, I'm not familiar with every one, but some that have bring your own liquor. Will they be permitted to consume alcohol outdoors, where normally on streets and things you're not permitted to do that?
That's something that in our vetting process, we're going to have to determine.
Okay. Let's see. One other thing, and this is through you to Ms. Delaney, regarding state contract purchasing. If you can beat a state contract by 10%, and you're purchasing under the rules of state contract, you can do that, correct? And I think that might be typically why they want the 3 quotes.
I'm sorry,
So if
can you
wanted to
repeat
get
that?
Done under the bid threshold, okay? And there's certain bid thresholds for certified
QPAs, correct, yes.
stuff. That you can, if you can beat a state contract price, say you want to buy a car, and it was from
And
whatever
you use a
dealership
state
has
contract, and the state contract is 40,000, but you obtain the 3 quotes and it's less.
and it's 36,000. One of them is 10% less.
Yeah.
You can purchase that way, correct?
Yes, of course.
Under the state contract rules.
Yes, you don't need
Okay.
to you don't need to use state contract either. Some municipalities prefer that for certain instances, but you could absolutely, do the research and go the route of getting the 3 quotes, 100%.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that for
Uh-huh.
myself. Let's see. Anyway, from what I understood about the food trucks, and again, very difficult to hear. Are you talking about food trucks at special events, or like permanently located in certain areas, say on Market Street or whatever?
Special events, it has nothing, it's exempt. What we're going to do is, with this new resolution, special events are exempt.
Okay, but I mean, you're not, just so I understand this correctly, you're not gonna have food trucks stationed at various spots, say along Market Street, not at a special event, a regular way of doing business,
I think that's what we're saying.
that you want to have that.
Yes.
Okay, now what about, I think, in fact, I think a council person mentioned this last week, about what about the businesses that operate, that's doing nothing except making competition more difficult for them.
Sal?
The ordinance,
It's got to get into the,
Like, you have a
This one?
truck, they're paying taxes,
Oh,
they have a
okay.
business there all the time, the truck can move back and forth, I know there was some, how many times you have to move it and everything, but if you bring more trucks in, I mean, how's that gonna serve the purpose of helping the long-term businessman or business person in Elmwood Park?
Mr. Freitag, if I may answer that for you, the ordinance itself addresses the issue that it has to be 1,000 feet away from any establishment, food establishment. That's not going to change.
Sal, get right up on that mic, he can't hear you.
That's not going to change. The ordinance already speaks to the distance that any truck that would be licensed would have to stay away from any establishment. That's 1,000 feet. That's not going to change. Now, what's going to change is that it would allow the establishment that does not have the space to have and to open a truck in front of their establishment. So the owner of the truck and the establishment would have to have the same ownership.
So if they're right in front of their own place,
Uh,
do that.
Exactly.
Any parking concerns, considering the fact that you're not only going to have people dining al fresco, but you're going to be having, you're still going to be having pickup. And
Yeah.
given the fact there's parking issues already on Market Street, how is that going to?
Well, it's the location which is then going to be determined by the chief, the Board of Health, the zoning officer, so that they can delineate the areas where they're going to allow these trucks to go to.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You all-
Happy birthday, Bob.
Hey, appreciate it. Anyone else care to speak from the public? Anyone else care to speak from the public? If there's no one else that cares to speak from the public, I will close the public portion. Mrs. Delaney, where are we?
Participants are muted, and they can unmute.
Mayor, if we could have a motion to enter into executive session?
All in favor? Thank you, good night.
Good night, everyone.
Mayor, Denise had,
Wait, time out.
is it off?
That's not.